Well, good morning. Good morning to all. How are you? Good to see you here this morning. And in spite of your healthy winnings, you found a way to make it here this morning and left all that money in your room in the safe, right? Yeah, it'll be there when you get back later on this afternoon. You can pick up President Ross where you left off, okay? Yes, indeed. But good morning to all of you. Good to see you here again this morning for the second part of our Presidential Leadership Summit. That for FSA, great to have you here. Thank you for sharing again your time with us today. We've got an exciting day, I think, today for you. We're going to start off this morning, as I said earlier, with some of our compliance-related activities. The information that we know sometimes that many of us don't get necessarily excited about hearing, but at the end of the day, it can be something critical and can save us a lot of efforts on the back end if we know what's coming down the tracks and what we need to avoid. And as I said, this is all geared toward you as presidents and senior administrators to hopefully you'll understand the roles that you play in making this happen on your campus. So thank you for that very much. A couple of housekeeping things. You should have received the email last evening. Did many of you get that? I know you get hundreds of emails. You should have gotten one that says, "We want your opinion." So did everybody get the "We want your opinion"? And it wasn't from the some god-awful place trying to get some information to sell you something. It was from our team at FSA. Please do take some time to go back and complete that survey. It's really critical as we make efforts to improve these sessions as we go along. We've already started thinking about what this looks like for next year. We know we've had a couple of series last year, this year, in which the format was kind of similar. We want to change it up a little bit going into next year. Next year we will be in Atlanta. A little easier to get to Atlanta, okay? And so for those of you who want to think about that, all right, a little easier, probably a little cheaper as well. But thank you so kindly for being here. But we are making plans for the event next year in Atlanta. Make sure you do complete that email note. We want your opinion. We really do want to hear from you in terms of how we can strengthen this process and make it easier as we go along. So that's it for my comments right now today. Again, thank you for being here. And we're going to start off this morning. We're going to be kind of fluid here. We're expecting the Secretary DeVos to arrive somewhere around 9:40. She is doing an opening keynote address this morning. And our other colleagues at the Federal Student Aid Conference, which is going on starting off today. They have about 5,000 folks over there who are listening and starting off today, and she'll be starting off there. And we are expecting her at about 9:40. And when that happens, we'll stop where we are and bring her to the table and pick back up after then, okay? So again, thank you for being here, and I'm going to stop now and ask my colleague and the actual project manager for this Presidential Leadership Summit, Mr. Larry Coles, who's a management improvement analyst within our Atlanta office of the Federal Student Aid, to come up and introduce our first speaker for the morning. Larry.
Thank you, Joel. Again, let me welcome you all back to the conference for today. I guess those who are missing, as Joel mentioned, probably the high rollers that won big time, and we probably won't see today, but thank you all for coming back this morning. We have for you the beginning session today is the Clery Act. We have this session is one of the very important sessions that we'll discuss a lot of the strategies and some information that we'll bring you with Clery. As you know, Clery is one of those important things that affect your institutions or may affect your institutions, and we want you to have the information and be able to get your questions and get some strategies. There will be some time for discussion that you'll have to discuss among yourselves at your tables, and our speaker will give you information as to when that will be. We're happy to have with us today Ms. Anna Achula. Anna is from our San Francisco office of Federal Student Aid. She's been with the Department of Education for a little over 10 years. Anna brings a lot of expertise to the team. She spent a few of those years, 5 of those years, in the compliance area, working with a lot of schools on different issues of compliance. And for the last 5 years, she's spent in the Clery office. She will bring you lots of information, lots of good information on the Clery Act, and I will present you Ann Archul. Thanks, Ann.
Good morning. Welcome. Thank you, Larry. So today, I wanted to talk to you about understanding the basics of federal campus safety and campus crime prevention. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. With that said, I want to start off with a disclaimer. A lot of the information that will be provided today might be a little graphic for some of the audience members, and if that's the case, please feel free to step outside, regroup and come back in when you feel like it. This session is intended to provide general information of the Clery Act and related laws. And with that said, I'm going to use some examples of some institutions, and it's not that I'm picking on them, it's just lessons learned. These concepts will be introduced at a high level, so the concepts you can take back with you and start your conversations with your administration. So we're going to talk about 5 key points today: the introduction, the basics of the Clery Act, what's at stake, what else you need to know about Clery, and what you can do to protect your institution. If there's one thing you can take away from this presentation today, is your #1 job is always campus safety and crime prevention. You want to remember that compliance is about doing the right thing well and all the time. You want to protect your brand, because once that brand is damaged, it's very hard to come back from. An example of that is Michigan State University. We have Dr. Strample, who is going to jail for misconduct. We have former President Lou Anne Simon from Michigan State University, who's going to trial for lying to law enforcement in a violent crime investigation. If the time comes, will you be able to do the right thing? The basics of the Clery Act. We talk a lot about the basics because, believe it or not, a lot of institutions still fall short in this area. Whether you're an institution of 50 students or 50,000 students, you have to be compliant in all aspects of the Clery Act. And that includes the annual security report, or otherwise known as ASR, the production, distribution, and notification, and we'll get into that in a couple of more slides. The annual crime statistics survey. Who at your institution fills out that survey and turns it in on time to the department? You need to have your ability to issue timely warnings and emergency notification. Do you have a plan in place in the event you need to evacuate the building in an emergency? If your institution has student housing, campus police, and/or safety, then there's other components that you need to include in your annual security report, such as the crime log, which has to cover all of your Clery geography. Missing student notification. If you have student housing, in the event that one of your students goes missing, do you have policies and procedures in place? Campus Sexual Assault Prevention and Awareness, and VAWA, Violence Against Women Act. What type of prevention do you offer your institution? We don't really get into Clery geography today, but I did want to mention to you that schools often fail in this area because the institution does not understand where their Clery geography begins and where it ends. So you really have to understand that. And I'm here all week, so if you need any kind of answers, please don't hesitate to ask. The enforcement tools. The program participation agreement is a contractual contract that each institution signs. It states, the institution understands their obligation and will live up to them, and failure to do so can have negative results, such as fines up to $57,317 per violation for Clery Act, provisional certification, which means growth restrictions, heightened cash monitoring, and then limitation, suspension, and/or termination. An example of heightened cash monitoring, Michigan State University was put on heightened cash monitoring due to the fact of so many Clery violations. And then you have your external factors, which tend to be a snowball effect. If you have student activism, that can go into media attention, which then you have public shaming, legal expenses, and so forth. Here are a few of the cases that we've had in the public eye, as you can see there. These are some of the program reviews that the department has conducted over the last few years. I encourage you to go to the website that's on the top of the page. That's our data center. And there you can see the different types of violations that the institution had for Clery violations. An example is University of St. Thomas. That was closed in 2017. Their violations were up to $172,000 due to the fact that they underreported crime statistics, such as forcible offense and burglary. And as you can see from the list there, we have Georgetown University, which is an elite public school. Then we have a community college. We have a public institution. We have a private. We have an HBCU up there. These are all department that the department enforces at every institution. The cost of Clery violations for Penn State. When you think of Penn State, you automatically think of Sandusky or Paterno. Well, that was just a small portion of the actual fines that were issued for Penn State. In fact, most of the fines had nothing to do with Sandusky or Paterno. They had to do with the fact that they failed to disclose crime statistics. They failed to disclose over 100 arrests and disciplinary referrals. Your annual security report, your production, distribution, and notification. Institutions must produce an accurate and complete annual security report, and it has to be within a single document. Sometimes I've been out to institutions, and I'll ask them, can I see your annual security report? And what they show me is just a piece of paper that just has statistics on it. So that's not an accurate and complete annual security report. You must actively distribute an accurate and complete annual security report. And what does that mean? You have to distribute it before October 1st of every year. And you can either do that by US mail, snail mail, electronic mail, or hand deliver. And if you do that, how does your institution keep the records for that? So in the event that the department goes out to your institution and we ask you, oh, can we see when you distributed last year's annual security report, and then you can produce it for us. You must actively notify prospective students and employees about the availability of the ASR. So for prospective employees, you might have it on your job application at the bottom, a link that they can click on, and it'll take them directly to the annual security report. There are 4 categories that we want you to know about crime. The first one is what we call laws of criminal offenses. These are crimes from homicide all the way down to arson. The second one is hate crimes, a criminal offense that was driven by bias against the victim, such as vandalism or destruction of property. The third one is VAWA, Violence Against Women Act, dating violence, domestic violence, sexual assault, and/or stalking. The fourth one is arrests and referrals for disciplinary actions, such as weapons, carrying and possession, drug abuse violation, and liquor law violation. And you'll see a lot of the disciplinary for drug abuse and liquor law when you have housing. What you need to know about campus security authorities, CSAs. How many of you know, off the top of your head, how many CSAs you have at your institution? Can I see a show of hands? Okay. Do you all know what a CSA is? Okay. A CSA is a person who's a mandatory reporter under the Clery Act. An example of a CSA is the Dean of Students, Director of Athletics, all athletic coaches, part-time employees, faculty advisors, sexual assault advocates, law enforcement, peer counselors, Title IX coordinators, coordinators of Greek life. That's a big one. What a CSA, one of the people that is not a CSA for Clery purposes is a faculty member. But for Title IX, they are. An example is when Penn State's review started, they identified 300 CSAs at their institution. During our post-review monitoring, they're up to 4,024 CSAs. What I'd like to do right now is have you break out for about 10 to 15 minutes within your tables, and then we're going to regroup. And I want you to answer the following questions that are on the slides. What's happening on your campus? How many CSAs does your campus have? How does your school notify CSAs of their reporting responsibilities? What evidence does your school keep to show that CSAs have been notified of their reporting responsibilities? And do CSAs receive any type of training? And what type of training? So I'll give you about 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. So go ahead and talk amongst your tables. How are we all doing? Are we ready to bring it back in? Okay. So we're going to go around the room and have you guys report out on what you've learned from each other's institutions. We'll go ahead and start over here to the left. So if anybody wants to be the spokesperson.
We determined that we don't know a lot about CSAs.
Can everybody hear? No, okay. Thanks, Larry.
Who's going to report out?
We determined that we don't know a lot about CSAs, and part of
Can everybody hear?
our notes to go home is to find out more about our CSAs, and some of us are texting our police officers right now, asking them if they know about CSAs.
That's great. Thank you.
This table?
Yes.
Well, we had a brief but lively discussion, and I think that the main points that came forward, one is there are some differences in the reporting requirements under the various laws, and it's important to understand what those reporting responsibilities are, because it's not just a blanket responsibility. There's details that are important. The other thing is that we all agreed that we need to, I agreed that we all, I don't want to speak for them, that it would serve us to be more assertive in documenting exactly who is a CSA each year, and making sure that the communication, training, and other requirements are documented. Not that they're not happening, but if it's not on paper, you don't know that it happened.
And that's a great point. A lot of institutions, you have all of these policies and procedures in place, but you just don't have it documented. So that's the key. Thank you for saying that.
Our group mainly was in fear. Worried about how we would measure up if we were evaluated today. Two questions that came up is one, is there training available from the Department of Education that could visit the campuses on a non-punitive basis that could provide assistance in being sure that we're in compliance? That's number one. And number two, everybody is doing the Clery reports by October 1st, but based on what you just put on the screen, we're not sure if the reports that have been submitted would be satisfactory. So the question is about that is, in the course of trying to get into compliance, is there punitive exposure for your last Clery report that in an institution that may not meet the standard?
That's a great question. I'll get back to you on that one. No, but as far as the CSA training, if you have police officers, if you have law enforcement, student housing, they could provide the training for you. Or you can go online to the internet and Google, and you can have some type of CSA training there. At this time, the department does not offer CSA training, but that doesn't say that we won't in the future. If you are questioning that what you turn in with the survey to the department and what you have as far as your statistics go, it's just a matter of having internal controls of checks and balances to see that those numbers match. Because that's a great point. A lot of times we go out to institutions and we see when we're reviewing the annual security report and we're looking at what you've submitted to the department, sometimes the numbers are off. And it could just be a human error. So. But you can give us a call, and we can help you. And believe me, if you give the department a call and you ask us for help, that doesn't mean that we're putting you on some list and we're going to go out and do a Clery review. You know, we're here to help you. And I always try to emphasize that so much whenever I'm out at institutions. You know, all it is a matter of a phone call or an email, and we can assist you. Okay, thank you. Did I answer your question? Okay. There you go.
I guess we're next. Well, I'll just go through the questions. The first thing, how many CSAs does your campus have? For us, the consensus at our table was from very few to a lot. No one knew an exact number, but we could probably tell you, you know, what they do. How does your campus notify CSAs of their reporting responsibilities? We all talked about different ways. One, maybe it's through email, or I gave an example at our school that we learned the hard way after a program review of different ways that we could notify our campus. At the beginning of each semester, we have a mandatory faculty and staff assembly. We call it convocation, but it's a little different from a convocation. But during that time, campus safety and security is always on the agenda. So we always give the information of how to report, who needs to report, and any documentation about the annual security report, and those things are part of that presentation, and it's done in conjunction with our crisis response and intervention team and our campus police. So we do that, and we also do the October 1st, making sure that information is out. What is evidence that your school keeps in the training? And I think we had the consensus at the table that it's all done through a module. There are different modules out there that you can use. For us, we have a combination, I think others at the table, of Title IX and the Clery information at the same time during that training. For us, everyone is required to do it, but especially those people who are CSAs.
Thank you.
Let me say good morning, everyone. We had a great discussion, and of course, going through the questions. The question is, who is a CSA? But we did come to the conclusion that I consider everyone a CSA on my campus. And although you said that faculty was excluded, sometimes they have very pertinent information to some issues that may take place on campus. So I have to consider that. Talking about how schools notify, I think one thing we talked about was communication, period, because when you look at a lot of the different areas, the drill down of information is probably problematic. For our particular campus, notifying CSAs of their responsibility. Likewise, the institution, we have Faculty Institute, where everybody, both the from the groundskeeper to the lunchroom worker, they are notified and trained during that time, our Faculty Institute. And then when you talk about evidence, we use documentation of them attending that workshop as evidence that they have been notified and received training. And then listening to you mention that you can go out and Google something online, but I think the main thing that we walked away with, that we need to do a better job of communicating not only with those on the institution, but with the public. When you talked about those individuals that want to come and work, and even parents who are looking for schools, somewhere to send their children, they want to know what that report is about. So how we make sure that that report is widely spread.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Designee.
Thank you. We too had an engaged discussion over these questions. And we have two institutions represented at our table. One of our institutions has, like this table here, designated every employee as a CSA, including student employees, with the exception of two particular occupations that are protected by law in terms of reporting, and those are, of course, our counselors, and we are a faith-based campus, so ministerial staff. But otherwise, everybody else has to train on a regular basis. The other institution has 45 CSAs, and again, both institutions require training for all CSAs on an annual basis, a combination mostly of in-person training as well as online training. And there is evidence of that either through a sign-in sheet, or the online training, of course, can be tracked in terms of who's accessing that and completing it. And we do that annually, and we report annually by October 1st in the ways in which you described. So, thank you.
Yes, we had a very good discussion here about Clery Act. My institution just went through on our own review because we weren't confident necessarily in the numbers. We wanted to make sure that we were doing it accurately, correctly, and catching everything. And what we found out is that we really needed to tighten up policies and procedures. CSAs we were good on. People on campus know their CSA responsibilities and who our CSAs are. But, and this may be something other institutions deal with. One of the challenges we found was that we have a lot of different offices that keep numbers on activities. So we have campus security. We have residential hall. We have a student rights and disciplinary office. So that's, you know, students, faculty, staff, anyone can make a referral there. And so we found out that we really needed to create a system where we made sure all the incidents that were reportable under Clery were coming into one place. And so we were just talking about, you know, that being a challenge, and I don't want to endorse any particular product, but there is software available if you're willing to invest it that can really help you do that. So we've made that investment at my institution. A couple of institutions here are using the same software and have made a commitment now to annual training for all of our CSAs across campus.
Thank you.
We don't want to go to jail. One of these guys said they've been there. But, well, we have 8 colleges at our table, and really varied. I think the common theme I heard from our group was that there's training provided on certain different modules in different areas, but I didn't hear anybody really doing formalized training specific to CSA work, so including us. And so I think we have student housing on our campus, and we have a safety and security department, and everything regarding the Clery Act and the reporting goes through that office. They also work closely with local law enforcement, and so anything that happens that way is recorded and kept track of, so we make sure we have a good report. We also have Title IX, which is in our HR department, and those two work closely together. They also provide training for those different areas. And then, but I think the next step for us is to formalize that training either through online resources like one of our colleges had, or otherwise bringing in someone to do a face-to-face. We do have large group meetings. I think somebody said convocation, but for us, we just have, we call it kind of an employee professional development day, and we have all employees in there at that time, and it'd certainly be the time to do that. We believe that all employees are CSAs for regard to reporting. We don't limit it's the same for Title IX, so we don't want to confuse anybody, so let's just have them all report on everything.
Great.
And I think that's the best approach and doesn't confuse anybody. That's all we got.
Thank you.
Okay, so for us, we had a discussion about who our CSAs are on campus, and what we agreed to is that we probably don't have that comprehensive number, but we know those categories of individuals who are considered, and would probably behoove us to improve that process by identifying them by position and name, and keep a continuous inventory so that we can continue to make sure that's updated. So we're pretty comfortable with that. As far as how does our school notify our CSAs of their responsibilities, little varied. In smaller discussions, of course, police will take care of that. In residence life, there's another discussion. Title IX training is another discussion. But what we will probably want to do is look at some sort of comprehensive module and make that electronic. That kind of flows into then how do we keep the documentation of how our CSAs have been advised of their responsibilities. And yes, absolutely, we want to go to a module for training for CSAs and making sure that once we've identified all those persons, we'll have them go through those modules. Little room for improvement, but we felt pretty good.
Thank you.
Good morning. We can set as a summary that we have a leader of all of the above, of the issues that other tables has been discussing. We found that we have different definitions of CSIs and that we need to review in our institutions the process and to be sure that we have the trainings in place. The other things is that we share how we manage the notification process. Also, we have different process, but we all have some kind of notification in place in order to be notified of what is happening in our campuses. And definitely, all agree that we need more training about it. And yeah, a local training, yes, maybe. From the Department of Education.
Okay, thank you.
So we have 6 colleges represented at our table, and we all have different ways in which we're accomplishing this. And some of us have police departments, and some have just security offices, campus safety, that kind of thing. But one of the things that is common among all 6 of us is that we're all doing this to some degree, but where we feel we need to do a better job is in the documentation and tracking of what we're doing so that there's evidence that we are complying with the regulation. We also talked at length about the off-campus locations. We have nursing programs, rad tech programs, other programs where students are performing clinical training at other sites beyond the campus, and the need to always remember that. And dual enrollment is another area where we need to make sure that we're in compliance and capturing the data from those off-site locations as well.
Thank you.
So when it comes to CSAs at our particular institution, we require everybody to do the training in their institution except for a counselor that we have specific to act as a confidential source. And that training happens, as one of our colleagues here said, we use software to specifically require everybody to sit down. And that software tracks and documents what happens as far as when people take it and what people are taking. And we usually organize that during our convocation with the ability for people, as they come on board, to receive training throughout the year. One point of discussion at our table also was, making sure that the people who do have the reporting obligations know how to move that information up so that presidents and other people and institutions who need to have the information are aware. So one of us were discussing putting together BIT teams to make sure that information flows up. Some of us have been discussing just what needs to be triggered institutionally to make that information flow up. Sometimes it takes something like a program review to come along to say, oh, wow, we really didn't have those channels of communication in place. Whether you have a public safety department with sworn police officers, creating those clear channels of communication is very important. And that can only happen if everybody knows what their responsibilities are and everybody receives that proper training. So particularly at our institution, we've been focused on making sure everybody receives that training and to clear up the lines of communication so that any incidents that happen can be properly acted upon.
Thank you. Perfect. So it pretty much looks across the board that you're all on the same page, so I'm feeling pretty good about it. I hope when you walk away, you feel pretty good about it. And I wanted to let you know, too, as a reminder, all of these presentations at the FSA conference after will be online so that you can download them and have them as keepsake. Yeah. Many of you know that this is Jeanne Clery. I don't know if you know the story about her. In 1986, she attended Lehigh University, and she was in her dorm sleeping when she was awoken by Joseph Henry, another student at Lehigh University. He was burglarizing her dorm. So then he proceeded to beat her, cut her, rape her, sodomize her, and finally strangle her to death. Prior to that, there were reports, over 181 reports to Lehigh University, that there were issues with the dorm locks, and nothing was done. I never thought this could happen here. Well, crime moves, so I'm here to tell you it happens anywhere. Emergency management. How do we develop an emergency management plan? We have to have basic understanding of the emergency management plan. We have to get organized, form a committee, identify all the hazards within your community, conduct a risk assessment, develop, implement, and update your management plan. At the bottom of, bless you, at the bottom of the screen, there is a website that you can go to, and it's very simplified. It'll tell you from start to finish, from preparation to recovery, of how to make an emergency management plan. There are two types of safety alerts. We have your timely warnings that are issued for all Clery reportable crimes, and then we have emergency notifications that are issued for any situation that may pose an immediate threat to health or safety issues. An example of this for emergency notification is Humboldt State University. If you've seen the news, or if you live in California, the gas and electric company has been doing these rolling blackouts. And so Humboldt State was notified that they were going to have some blackouts for a couple of days. So what they did was they sent out the emergency notification to their community and let them know that classes would be canceled, they could come back to class on this day. Then they sent out another emergency notification just for the students in housing to let them know, listen, this is what's going to happen. Come here. We have extra blankets and flashlights, and this is where you can go for additional food and supplies. So they did a really good job. This monument here is at the University of Texas. This was August 1st, 1966. This was the beginning of the modern age of mass shootings. At the bottom of that monument, I don't know if you see that, where it says Baby Boy Wilson. Baby Boy Wilson was shot in his mother's belly, so he never got to see the day of light. Virginia Tech, August 16th, 2007. This was the largest mass casualty shooting at the time. I believe we've surpassed that by now. This is Stevens Institute of Business and Arts. Now, this is a smaller institution in St. Louis, in the downtown area. The financial aid office is on the 4th floor. One of the students, for no apparent reason, decided to go up to the 4th floor and shoot the financial aid advisor. And he also, when he shot the financial aid advisor, he grazed another employee as well. Both of them survived. The problem here at this institution is they did not have an emergency evacuation plan in place. So what happened was, most of the people got injured because they ran out through the stairwells, they were trampled on the stairwells, and they ran into the streets, and they got hit by cars. You have to have a rally point. Umpqua Community College in rural Roseburg, Oregon. Now this slide right here shows you from CNN. CNN had this picture up for 15 minutes. When the police finally arrived, they didn't see anything that happened with the shooting because the shooting was over. What they did here was one last gunshot. Kids were running around, students were running around like crazy. That last gunshot, when they turned the corner, was Christopher Harper Mercer, who inflicted the gunshot wound to himself to the head and died. From start to finish, it took 9.5 minutes to kill all these people. As of today, their numbers of shootings have gone up. The year's not over yet, And this even includes K through 12, over 365 mass shootings as of last Wednesday, excuse me, and the year's not over yet. Other serious threats. We need to take a look internally. These are some examples. Do you have any disgruntled employees at your institution that might, for some apparent reason, do they have access to your computers and they can sabotage you and destroy your records? Illness outbreak, untreated mental illness. Purdue University. This is Andrew Boldt. Andrew Boldt was an honor roll student studying to be an engineer. Here he is with his two other brothers. His parents sent 3 children away to school, and only 2 came back. This is Cody Cousins. Cody Cousins decided to walk into a classroom full of 9 students and a professor and shoot Andrew Boldt, 5 times and stab him 19 times. Now, Cody was a very ill man. He had issues with drug and alcohol addiction, and he was untreated for mental illness. When the judge asked Cody, "Why did you shoot Andrew Boldt?" he said, "I wanted to. I wanted to kill Andrew Boldt because I'm glad he's dead." Now, here's the concern. Cody Cousins visited the Office of Counseling and Psychological Services at Purdue University 17 times, and nothing was done. Now, this is the omen of things to come. There's a California case, the Regents of the University of California, UCLA, versus the Superior Court of Los Angeles. The female student was injured at the chemistry lab by a kitchen knife by another student. And the court's ruling was the school's duty is to take responsibility or reasonable steps to protect students where it becomes aware of a foreseeable safety threat. Now, allegedly, UCLA knew that the student with the knife was schizophrenic, and he was hearing voices saying that the victim was calling him names. Laura Dickinson. She died some 20 years after Jeanne Clery did, almost exactly the same, at Eastern Michigan University. The difference between Laura and Jeanne was that the institution at Eastern Michigan University tried to cover it up. They tried to say that it was an accident and that she died over an asthma attack. The responding officer wrote the report and refused to change it. Her chief of police said, "You need to change the report." She said, "No, I won't." The president came, "You need to change your report." "No, I won't." Eventually, everyone at that institution was removed, including the president. That officer did the right thing. Campus sexual assault. This happens at any institution. The first case that the department had was about 15 years ago, and it was at a career college, a small institution, where they did not report 4 sexual assaults. The VAWA Act, Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act of 2013, fills in the space between the Clery Act and Title IX. The act emphasizes on awareness and training, effective measures to investigate. This law is about giving people choices on how they report. Primary prevention are the long-term steps that your institution needs to take to reduce sexual assaults over time. Risk reduction. What can your institution do to immediately reduce the likelihood of these types of crimes happening? Bystander intervention. Get the community involved to stop these crimes from happening. Accommodation. This is a very important one. The need to accommodate is very important. You want to help put the victim back to where they were before they became a victim. We'll put them back to close enough to where before they were a victim. Oops. That third bullet there in the beginning requires specialized training for disciplinary hearing officials. This is very important. What is the person being charged with? You have to know that exactly. Standard of evidence. What kind of evidence do you have? What are the sanctions at your institution? You have to understand the school's policies. You have to give both the accused and the accuser simultaneously notice of the outcome. And that's a big one, too. A lot of times they just tell one person and they don't tell the other. There's something I had to tell you. Sanctions. I don't know if you're familiar or if your institution practices this, but we've seen it at a couple of institutions, and you might want to think about that. In the event that there was a sexual assault and the person that did it was found guilty, and what did they get? Go home, write a paper, tell me why you won't do this again. You know, we see that. Let's see here. What does a predator look like? It could be the person sitting next to you on the train on your way into the office. It could be your neighbor. It could be the person standing in line at the grocery store. What you don't want is you don't want a Jerry Sandusky at your institution or a Stephen Jenson. Now, I'm not sure if you know who Stephen Jenson is. He was a doctor at the University of Michigan Hospital. He was addicted to child pornography, and it was so bad that he would actually bring in the child pornography at the hospital. You don't want a Larry Nassar. This picture here is the mother's section at the trial where the survivors read their victim impact statements. 332 survivors and counting. Horrific. Now, what can you do to protect your institution? I don't think. Let's take 5 minutes to break out at your tables and discuss what you can do to protect your institution. are we ready? We're really excited out there. We got you engaged in talking. But unfortunately, due to the time, we won't be able to go around the room. So I wanted to give you enough time to finish the slides and be able to let you stretch your legs before the next session. But I'm glad that you guys got to talk about it. You can continue talking about it later. One thing that I want to mention is that after the session and after you go home, after FSA conference, you know, you've met a nice group of people here that you can start to network with and bounce ideas off of each other. So I hope you take advantage of that. So, what can you do to protect your institution? You can be proactive. Form strong partnerships with local law enforcement and community leaders. You can encourage prompt reporting. Foster a culture of transparency. That is big across the board everywhere. Make it easy to be informed. And share your best practices with other institutions like you are today. The key is administrative capability. You want to employ an adequate number of qualified personnel. You want to have checks and balances for your internal controls. You want to implement written procedures, and besides implementing them, you actually want to put them into practice. A lot of people have all these nice binders, and they have them in their office, and it's like, well, so you go out there, and we're like, okay, so how do you do these? Oh, well, and they don't know. They have the procedures, but they don't put them in place. Based on what you've learned today, would your school be able to demonstrate an acceptable level of administrative capability when it comes to the Clery Act? Can I have a show of hands? So I did a good job? And I'm going to leave you this morning with some best practices on the slide here. And again, this presentation will be available after Friday, I believe. When everybody goes back home, they can download it. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.